Every child is unique and every child is a star. As parents, we're often concerned about developmental milestones, and as much as we may try not to, there's often a tendency to compare. We all know that it's wrong to compare and to judge. On my show, I often say, and in fact it's based on a quote by Gwyneth Paltrow, one should never judge another parent or another child because each one's situation is different. Today we have with us two wonderful parents of very special children. We have with us Shalini, who's got two gorgeous little girls, Latika and Nayanthara. Thank you, Shalini, for being on the show. And we've got Santosh, who is a dad to his 12-year-old son, Rajdeep. Thank you very much for being on the show too.
Thank you for inviting us.
So to start at the beginning, when your kids were very, very little, how did you first discover that there was something a little different?
When she was around 1 year old, I could sense some intuition that something is not okay with my child. And I would keep mentioning it to my, family members, but they would just sort of say, no, you're a little hyper. Maybe I was a little hyper mom, that there's nothing wrong with her. She'll just be fine and all. But then around 17 months, her milestones were delayed very much. She was not walking, actually. She was standing on her toes, not eating properly. She was very weak. There were a lot of things like that. And then that time, I think everybody else saw it. And then we started investigating further. She was not like on the spectrum at that point of time, but other milestones were delayed.
I know that one thing I've seen from autism spectrum is very wide. I think of it as a rainbow, and someone could fall on any part of it and perhaps be very borderline. Shalini, for you, as you mentioned, Nayanthara is perhaps somewhere on the spectrum, but there are also other issues.
Like ADD. You have an autism spectrum, you have classic autism. A child doesn't make eye contact, doesn't even talk, and many of them don't have speech. And then you have the milder ones where you have some symptoms of autism,
right,
but not the full-blown autism.
Right.
And then that ADD or ADHD often overlap.
So what is ADHD?
ADHD is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
Okay.
The child lacks the focus. The attention span is very, very narrow. The therapies and the education system thereafter,
right,
would help the child to, broaden the focus.
Okay.
And help him focus on an activity for a longer duration of time.
So Santosh, what were the first signs that alerted you and your wife that there was something different?
When Rajdeep was about 7 months, he had his first bout of febrile seizures.
Okay.
And we met the best of the doctors, and he said this is too early to even identify. So about after 2 years, we put him through the tests, and that was the time when we realized that he's onto the end spectrum of ADHD. We were lucky to identify this so early.
Yes.
So that early intervention could happen, and we could take it from that point.
Yeah. So I think this is a word that I hear a lot, is early intervention.
True.
Yet I also find that with a lot of parents say that the detection actually happened much later, because in many cases it's such a grey area.
Parents have to be a little bit more alert,
right,
when your child is growing about the milestones.
Okay.
It may not be autism, it may be ADHD, or it may be something else, but at the end of the day, it is all a neurodevelopment, similar kind of thing.
Right.
Parents have this very strong instinct. We are all born with it.
Yeah.
And we have to just go along with that. We feel that something's not right. It's very important you do as much as possible early.
I know you're both your children are in a wonderful school which has great facilities, but what's your view on inclusion and integration and the choice of school?
Rajdeep was part of a mainstream school.
Right.
Inclusive education, in my opinion, is just still a term that is being used.
Right.
And it's pretty difficult in our country to actually implement it on the ground level because there's too much of resource limitations. You need special educators,
yeah,
who are specially trained for this activity. So my son went into a mainstream school, and that's where, he faced rejection. He had to be put on some medication which actually killed his appetite and his sleep both.
Oh,
He didn't grow physically as well.
Right.
And in a typical classroom structure, it's pretty difficult for a child who comes with his special difficulties.
Yes.
And we are very lucky, I would say, that after a lot of research going around in the special schools, we found about Gateway School of Mumbai.
Right, right.
And this school actually has transformed our son. It's about 3 years now, he's in the 4th year. And there's a phenomenal change in this child.
The school is really, really amazing. I mean, I think these kids cannot function in a classroom of 40, 30 children. I've seen my daughter, she was going to kindergarten school, and there in a class of 20, she was struggling.
Right.
In that school, the child was sort of gets left behind in one corner.
Right.
So, I mean, I didn't put her in a mainstream school. I put her directly to Gateway. She was 5.5 when she joined. And it's made a world of a difference in her confidence.
As much as we say we shouldn't care what people think, I still think we do live in a society where, unfortunately, people do pass judgments, and perhaps they're not always invited judgments. Have you ever faced any sort of nasty comments or anything like that?
Not nasty comments, but sometimes I feel like, you know, when parents compare their children or speak about their children's accomplishments, and you are there, and just to be a little sensitive, you know,
Yes.
to understand that we can't like be talking so much about our kids. Our kids have little achievements, but you know, those are great.
Big
those are great for us. Like,
of course. Now, speaking about the future, once you've actually identified what exactly the condition is that something that concerns you? Is that something that you sort of dwell over, or do you think that, of course, it's all going to be fine?
The future is always something which I think we don't dwell on much. Here, the thing is that the effort you put in and the results that come out, either very little or very delayed, and with special needs, one thing I've realized over the years, you never stop working.
You as a parent know your child best. So when you see those milestones and those achievements, it must be so rewarding to see when they've crossed that big, you know, hurdle.
Instead of trying to focus on what they can't do, you have to focus on what they can do.
Yes.
And each of them can do some things beautifully.
Yes.
Just encouraging them to do that.
Yeah.
And focusing on the positives instead of harping on the negatives is what we have to do all the time.
Absolutely.
Most parents have an issue of self, rejection, and that's where the biggest difficulty arises. The acceptance is the biggest wall,
Yeah.
And the earlier you break it off, faster your child can develop.
Yeah.
All of us are seeing the Rio Olympics.
Yes.
Michael Phelps, 21 Olympic gold medals. He himself is ADHD.
Really? Yes.
Albert Einstein, Newton, they were ADHD.
Yes.
So, we have so many role models within the spectrum. So, your child could be one of them. You never know.
Absolutely. And I think what's really lovely is the positivity. And I think that's what I always say on the show, that the main reason to do this show is raising awareness, having conversations, that there are now slowly more and more, great schools and facilities that can help a child develop to their full potential. And on that note, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Do write in to me on our social media handles, and for latest updates, do log on to our website. Till we meet again, bye-bye.